cool breeze, chills in Marc's stomach, and freedom from Ducati to Yamaha for Rossi. And Rossi thought it's a comeback like 2008, but it was a start of a new era. Marc Márquez, he showed up like a joke nobody should have laughed at. 20 years old, grinned too clean for the violence he carried. A kid who looked like he'd come to sign autographs, and instead brought a blacklist. 2013 wasn't a season that built a champion. It revealed one. It didn't hand a crown to a deserving veteran. It executed an entire generational order in public, with Márquez doing the dirty work and smiling while the blood dried. Here's the thing. When Casey Stoner walked away at the end of 2012, he didn't just leave a seat. He left a throne with the door open. Rossi's return to Yamaha after 2 disastrous Ducati years had everyone thinking nostalgia, redemption, the kind of soap opera arcs MotoGP writes when it wants to be sentimental. Lorenzo had the clinical machine and the cold head to defend a title. Pedrosa had the late-season momentum and the ghosts of close calls that sharpened him. The grid expected a year of familiar fights. Nobody had a plan for a 19-20-year-old who rode like physics was a suggestion. Márquez arrived with tools that read like a forensic report on how to terrorize a field. He ran corners like somebody who'd already memorized the lives of every champion and decided to rewrite them. Deep, late braking that made other riders wince, lean angles that bent human anatomy and rubber into new shapes, a willingness to trade contact for position that looked reckless until you realized it worked. Every time. He didn't wait for respect. He took it. He didn't kneel to history. He executed it. Qatar, the signal. Under the floodlights, everyone expected a rookie to survive, to observe, to learn. Márquez finished the race on the podium. That's not the headline. The headline is, he rode as if podiums were his homework and annihilation his lesson plan. Lorenzo and Rossi left with pace and points, but the paddock noticed something they couldn't unsee. A predator who respected no pedigree. Austin, the record breaks open. Márquez makes Circuit of the Americas his ceremonial ground and becomes the youngest MotoGP race winner in history. 20 years and some change, and Freddie Spencer's record is smashed like a cheap windshield. This wasn't a fluke on a lucky set of laps. It was a pattern. A kid who'd only just packed his mantelpiece with trophies in lower classes was now taking the premier class record book and writing his name in permanent ink. The old men in the garage didn't get to lecture him on patience because he never gave them the time. Jerez. This is where he started stealing dignity, not just positions. The final corner pass on Lorenzo was more than a move. It was a public humiliation delivered with surgical intent. Lorenzo, the defending champion, was shoved off the high ground and told to find his way back to respect. Pedrosa tasted the same bitterness that season. Rossi, smiling in his Yamaha comeback, realized something worse than being beaten, being looked past with contempt. Márquez's moves read like warnings written in sparks on the asphalt. He wasn't racing idols, he was rearranging them. You can catalog the wins, and you should, because the numbers back the violence up. Márquez didn't limp toward points. He piled up victories, poles, fastest laps, and podiums until the stat sheets looked like a crime scene. As a rookie, he scored more poles and podiums than predecessors who'd taken years to learn how to breathe the air of MotoGP. He ended the year with a points haul that would shame veterans. Those numbers didn't whisper. They shouted, "This is not a season. This is a takeover." But Dominion on paper isn't the full story. He crashed, he got hurt in practice and racing. He made rookie mistakes. Phillip Island's bike swap disqualification is one. He stayed out a lap too long, paid the price, and nobody in the paddock felt relief. That's how much fear he carried. Even a mistake didn't feel like an equalizer. It felt like a delay. The championship still looked like his to lose, and most of the paddock already assumed he wouldn't. Valencia, the execution. The final race was theater, and Márquez performed like an assassin who doesn't need to swing a knife when a ledger does the work. Lorenzo won the race. Surgical? Perfect. The answer watchers wanted. But Márquez didn't need victory. Third place, smart points management, and the title wrapped around his name. At 20 years and 266 days, he became the youngest Premier Class world champion in history. Rossi's road to his first Premier Class crown, years of grind and build, stands as a counterpoint. Márquez did in one season what legends took seasons to forge. That is what made people choke on the word rookie. And then the noise after the race. The reaction stitched the moment into legend. Lorenzo, scorched and sincere, called Márquez's aggression borderline. He admired how absolute it was and resented that someone so young could be so merciless. Rossi, always a showman of shade and affection, did the mafia thing. Congratulate, invite, surveillance disguised as hospitality. He hosted Márquez at the ranch in Tavulia, an offer that looks like mentorship until you understand the code. Bring your enemy inside where you can study him. Rossi's lines about Márquez, maybe beating my records, have been quoted as both warning and admission. He said it not in terror, but in a sardonic acceptance. The kind of thing you say when your heir shows up to the execution with a smile. Those quotes, later amplified across interviews in 2018 and beyond, read different ways as the years passed. Playful, worried, fatalistic. Don't soften the image. Márquez didn't just win races, he rewired the psychology of the grid. Riders who grew up studying Rossi and idolizing Pedrosa found a kid who treated sanctity like testing clay. He passed with contact that looked obscene from the distance and surgical close-up when you paused the footage. He made other riders doubt their lines, their courage, their calculations. He converted confidence into a liability in one season. That's not a talent you teach. That's a contagion. Now, read the season as a sequence of small wars. At circuits where veterans expected to shine, Márquez shoved himself into the argument and refused to leave. At tracks where late braking was a death sentence, he found himself immortal. When he crashed, as he did, he came back harder. He collected lessons like trophies and used them to sharpen his aggression. The field didn't adapt fast enough because adaptation requires time. Márquez didn't give them time. Let's put some facts where the fire is. As a rookie in 2013, Márquez set records for pole positions, fastest laps, podiums, and total points as a newcomer, a numerical avalanche that underpinned the narrative of dominance. Those aren't narrative flourishes. They're forensic evidence. They show how deep his control over the season truly was. But the brutality wasn't just measured in wins and poles. It was measured in ego wounds. Jerez's pass on Lorenzo, live. The shove at Aragon with teammates tangling. The look on older champions' faces when Márquez threaded a line nobody was supposed to try. Confusion, the brief human reaction before acceptance. Rossi's infamous mix of sarcasm and respect about Márquez possibly breaking his records was not an indictment but a preview. He knew what he was looking at. Not just a rival, but a force of nature that would keep coming even when struck down. And here's the crueler thread, the prophecy and the pause. Rossi's wry comment about Márquez beating records didn't feel prophetic until the injury chapters turned the tone from jest to omen. Jerez 2020, Márquez goes wide, falls back, then rips through the pack in a way that made the grid's stomachs drop. He hunted down rivals like a man trying to make up years of promised violence in one race. Then the horror, a heavy high side, a fractured humerus, the start of a long surgical odyssey. The beast that had arrived in 2013 got shot in 2020, and the sport watched as a lightning strike that had made a path of domination was interrupted by bone and hospital corridors. That crash delayed the prophecy, but did not nullify it. It paused the terror. It did not end it. Fast forward between the pages of pain, and you can see the arc. Márquez arrives as a rookie annihilator in 2013, builds a myth with thrill and terror, gets interrupted by the cruelest kind of luck in 2020, then begins the slow, stubborn work of returning, not simply to podiums, but to the hunger that made him a weapon in the first place. Those years of injury, of surgeries, of recovery and doubt don't make his early years less violent. They make them prophecy. They make the 2013 season look less like an anomaly and more like phase one of an inevitable war plan. Let's be brutally clear. 2013 was not about etiquette. It was about proving that a new kind of rider existed, someone who could marry dirt track aggression with the surgical mind of a chess player. That marriage created moves fans would replay for a decade and created lines other riders started to worry about. If you want a sport to be suddenly unpredictable, you add Márquez. If you want a paddock to question the rules of engagement, you let him loose. If you want champions to grow thin with worry, you let him pass them with a grin. Now, for a second, we do the quiet anatomy of the season's numbers without sugar. Rookie year, poles, podiums, points, wins, all stacked in a way that made critics who worshipped experience look foolish. He collected trophies against defending champions, and he did it with a casual viciousness that felt both disrespectful and exact. The statistical footwork is evidence. He wasn't lucky. He was consistently superior. Remember this when you watch the footage. Every lap where Márquez threads the tiniest of gaps is aggressive by design, not accident. He trains for those moments, he calculates them, then commits with the kind of fearlessness you only see in men who have decided to accept the consequences ahead of time. That's what made him dangerous in 2013, and what explains the later years when the fights got nastier and the stakes higher. He learned how to behave like a weapon, and he practiced until he fit the profile perfectly. And the human side, because brutality without motive is just cruelty. He grew up idolizing riders like Rossi and Pedrosa. The violence he brought wasn't born in malice. It was born in a belief that the only language MotoGP respected was domination. He arrived with that creed and burned its letters into the memory of the sport. When legends criticized him, it was always with a twinge of the personal. They saw their craft in him and feared what it meant to be surpassed by someone who'd learned all their faults and sharpened them into advantages. The end of the 2013 book is decisive. At Valencia, he closed the season with the youngest Premier Class crown in history, not because the guard had been gentle, but because he had been relentless. The champions he beat didn't fall because they were old. They fell because a new kind of violence had been introduced to the game, and it moved with a smiling brutality. Márquez's title was less an achievement measured in trophies than a revolution measured in the quiet panic he left behind. So where does that leave us thinking ahead? It leaves us with the real terror of the story. 2013 was only page one. If you thought the rookie season was hell, wait until you read the next chapter. 2014 wasn't recovery. It was consolidation of power. 10 straight wins to start the year, an emperor building an empire. The 2013 Márquez was the kid who breaks into a bank and walks out with the vault code. The 2014 Márquez was the man who returns the next day and burns the institution to the ground. That's what we got. But there's a cold fact underneath the filth and fury. This guy's record is built on mechanics, training, and a psychological calculus that makes brutality repeatable. The sport learned a lesson the hard way, that a smiling young man could be the most dangerous weapon of all. You watched the moment a new era started. You watched the kid who treated idols like practice dummies become the man who rewrites records. You watched humiliation delivered in broad daylight and applause afterwards. You watched the beginning of something that would not be content with a single title or a single season. 2013 was the rising. 2014 would be the march. Next episode. We open 2014 and don't just describe domination. We document a methodical, clinical slaughter. 10 straight race wins. Psychological attrition, strategy turned into weaponry. If 2013 was the kid breaking in, 2014 is the conqueror declaring the city his.